Hello, hello, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers. I'm your host, David the Skeptic, and I'm joined by the not so usual suspects. We have got our friend from afar, Matthew Taylor. How you doing, Matt?
I'm groovy. Good to see you again, sir.
Excellent. I don't actually believe they use groovy in England, do they?
I do.
Yeah, that's wrong. You will be reported. And we also have from a land where groovy is often used, though he has probably never said the word, Chase Tyler. Chase, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good, thank you. And no, I've
You're
never
very
used the word
mellow, I
groovy.
understand, this morning. Never
Yes, I
mind.
tend to be.
Yeah,
I
okay.
tend to be.
I've seen you on the podcast. You're not always mellow, my friend. Um, So we've got a very mellow Chase this morning. We'll see what happens. We don't often have Chase and Matt on the same show. We've got a couple of lurkers in the chat room today. That number may or may not grow, but we might acknowledge some of the comments that are in the chat. But what we usually do during the show is when someone says something interesting in the chat room, we just say it ourselves as if we thought of it. And we don't give attribution. So that's probably what will happen. If the conversation sounds a little bit more intelligent today than it usually does, it's probably the chat. But that said,
Obviously.
yesterday, if you have not heard yesterday's show, and from your perspective, it may not be yesterday, maybe last week. If you have not heard last year's show, I don't know when you're listening to this. We talked about war and self-defense. So we're in a series on killing, A Time to Kill, and we're looking at the various phases of killing. We started with a very high-level discussion between myself and David Russell. That was a pretty good conversation. We followed with the show on abortion. We had a very lively panel featuring Teddy the bear. That was a terrible show. It was a train wreck. It was a dumpster fire, a nightmare hell stew of a show. You should also listen to that too. Um, it was also the show that you should expect. It's a very emotional show, and it's hard to talk about abortion without having that kind of show. So we did it. I've stamped my merit badge. We're done. We'll probably revisit it next year. Yesterday, we discussed war and self defense. That was one of the best shows in the history of Skeptics and Seekers. So, good job, gang, to that. We had a guest, Christian guest, Travis. It was his first time on Skeptics and Seekers. He did a fine job in that conversation, and we're going to have him, if everything goes right, we're going to have him later on in this discussion, but he wasn't able to make the panel. But I'm going to ring him up after this show and do a separate interview with him and tack it on to the end of the show. Now, if his interview is not on the end of the show, something went badly wrong. But that's the plan right now. Today's show is exclusively on the death penalty. And just so you know, next week's show will be the last topic show that will be combining euthanasia and suicide. I look forward to a very interesting, lively, and possibly heartbreaking show. It's a very tough subject to talk about, but we're going to close the series after that with Brian with a Y and myself in our usual finale at the end of these um, marathons. And at the end of the podcast, if I remember, I will tell you what will be coming up after this series. But we're rambling quickly toward the end of the series, at the end of the season. And so we've got a few things to finish off the season with a bang. If you think this this series has been good, just wait till you see what's coming next. So with that, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Log in, click on the show that says A Time to Kill, scroll down, log in with your Discuss account, and discuss away. The comments are always lively and fun. You can take me to task in that forum, or if you would like, you can send me an email at skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. On with the show. Yeah. The death penalty. I'm sorry. This is such bad timing. I've I've got Siri going off in my ear, and it's really screwing with my ability to concentrate. Hello, new guest in the chat room, by the way. I am so glad to see you today. Hope all is well with you. The death penalty, capital punishment. I have an opening statement. I've been questioning whether I should even make this opening statement or not, but I think I will go ahead and start the discussion by laying out part of my thoughts here, and we'll unfold them as the discussion comes along. But the most interesting part of this discussion is probably not my thoughts on the subject. I suspect that we're all going to have very different opinions. I mean, there are only two opinions that you could have about the death penalty, if you're for it or against it, but there are a whole host of reasons how you come to that conclusion. And so I will say up front that my opinions on this subject are sometimes confusing and conflicted, but I will try to bring some sanity to it over the course of this show. And so I will begin by saying that I am in favor of the death penalty. Uh, I promote the idea of capital punishment, and I do it with the same heavy heart as I do with war and as I do with abortion. I think it's a terrible thing, and I hate it. And I hate defending it at any level. But I don't think that I have a choice if I'm going to be intellectually honest and consistent. So I also would say that my defense of the death penalty is limited. And over the course of the discussion, I plan to talk about why the death penalty is a terrible thing and why we shouldn't do it. So it will be interesting. Try to keep up. So let me begin with where I used to be on the death penalty. I've always been in favor of it, but I've been a Christian for most of my life. So as a Christian, my reasons for supporting the death penalty were as simple as you could possibly get. The God of the Bible was in favor of the death penalty. And it seemed inconsistent and incoherent to say that God is opposed to the death penalty. Why would anyone say that who has read the Bible? The God of the Bible could not possibly be opposed to the death penalty. And in fact, if you look at the things that he applied the death penalty to, it's things that we wouldn't even consider applying the death penalty to today. Being gay would get you dead. Now, that used to be the case in several countries, but I think that we've mostly stamped that out in countries that anyone would want to live in. Adultery, run-of-the-mill garden variety adultery was a death penalty offense. Of course, my favorite, and I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek, my favorite would be the child or the wife or the friend who comes to you and tries to persuade you to worship other gods besides Yahweh. That got the death penalty. And in fact, it got a death penalty so bad, you were to not feel any sympathy for them. You were not to hear them out. And you would be the first hand as you gathered together a death mob to kill your kid or wife or best friend. Yours would be the first hand raised against them with a stone. So you can't possibly look at the way God punished and taught his people to punish and say this God is against the death penalty. But what happened? Well, I'm not a Christian anymore, and I don't defend any thought processes of that God. So surely I will have changed my mind about the death penalty. Well, I've changed my mind about the reasons for why I'm in favor of it, but unfortunately not for the practice itself. And the reason is very humanistic. I think that our system of justice is terrible. And I hope that we get a chance to talk about what justice means and what it is today. I think it's terrible. And when we talk about the death penalty, we're usually talking about something that is as opposed to life in prison without parole. And those are kind of the two options set before you. You can have either the death penalty or life in prison without parole. But I contend that life in prison without parole is not life at all. It's actually the death penalty. It's just a slower, more torturous death. And it's a misnomer. There is nothing about prison that evokes life. Life is what you have when you're not in prison. Life, the things that you do, where you exercise your choices and your autonomy, that is stripped away from you when you go to prison. It is not life as we know life. It is death. It is death by torture. It is death by the systematic stripping away of humanity. Prison is an inhumanity machine. It is a dehumanizing institution. And I would argue that its sole purpose is to punish by dehumanizing you, so that by the time you have been there for a while, you really are an animal in a cage. If you weren't when they brought you there, you will be after a while. And so death in prison without parole is a death penalty. And if that's the only two choices that we're given, torturous, lingering death in prison without parole, or a quick death, I'll take the bullet every time because it's the better choice. And so in that way alone, I support the death penalty as an option to that. I will have more to say about that, but I'll spare some of that for the show. And I'm going to move to Matt. I don't know if you have something prepared to say or not, but if you want to speak generally about your position and let us know where you'll be coming from today, feel free to do that now.
I'm very, oh, excuse me. I'm very different to you. I'm anti the death penalty. Years ago, in a conversation at work, somebody asked me outright, when could I agree with the death penalty and when? And the answer I gave then was, in extreme circumstances, yes. And I'm pretty much the same now. In an extreme circumstance, yes, I can accept the death penalty. How that extreme circumstance gets defined, it will probably get very messy because I don't know how I would define that extreme circumstance. So I'm probably far more anti the death penalty than you are, because my view on it is, as soon as you've decided that the appropriate punishment for somebody is to kill them, you have given up on any opportunity of rehabilitation. You have decided that it is not worth your effort to rehabilitate somebody. You've decided that you are not capable of rehabilitating that person. You have given up. It is the coward's way out, because you are not prepared to put in any effort at all for rehabilitation or to rectify the circumstances which cause that person to be given death penalty. It is a failure, and it is a failure of the living to kill somebody. So that's my view on the death penalty. And I want to push back on your thing about prison as well. Prison, proper prison where you actually make an effort to rehabilitate people, you improve their education, you give them counseling over what it was that you do absolutely everything you can to change their circumstances, so that at the end of that prison term, what you've got is somebody who is better suited to a productive society. And if prison is not doing that, and prison is just a segregation and a torturous place, then yes, maybe death is the better option, but prison should not be like that. Prison should be a better place, but this is not a show about prison. This is a show about the death penalty. And in a world where we have the ability and the capability of rehabilitating people, of turning people around, of making people into better people than they are, so that society does not need to fear them, then anything that ends in death is a failure of our society, and we should be ashamed of it.
Okay. You think that we disagree, but you just are previewing some of my arguments to come. Chase, what you got, Chase?
So as far as myself, I also am against the death penalty. As far as I understand, as far as I believe, there's no reason. There's no reason to institute it ever. So even for Matthew's point of an extreme situation, I don't know any extreme situation that also equates the loss of or the taking of one's life, especially if we as most societies agree that the taking of life is wrong, period. Or killing a person is just wrong. And of course, that's like a larger discussion. I think we've had it before. But as far as anything else, the death penalty is pretty much just a conclusion we've come to because we can't think of anything else, and someone shouldn't be subject to our ignorance to solving a problem. That person has a problem, and it's just our jobs to solve it. And death is just saying, "I'm done trying to solve it." There's nothing further to do.
Okay. So that's a good starting point. I'm gonna break tradition. Who gives a damn about tradition? It's my show. I can do what I want to. I'm going to allow anyone in the chat, if they would like to raise their hand. You can raise your hand by just turning on your mic and giving a brief statement about your opinion. Also, in the chat room, if you don't want to make a statement, I would like you to at least answer the question yes or no, so that I can just see that clearly by your name and poll death penalty, yes or no.
And while we're waiting for any of those, here in the UK, obviously the death penalty has just not happened for goodness knows how many years, decades. I think the 60s was the last time we killed anybody in the UK, might be earlier than that. And there's just no indication of the death penalty coming on. I don't think any government for decades here in the UK has been prepared to even consider bringing back the death penalty. And I think we're a better country for it.
Okay,
we've got some no's in the chat.
Yes, but we have at least one yes.
Yes, we have a maybe. It depends.
It's a situational yes.
Yeah, well, okay. So let me just comment to you, Matthew, in particular. I want to say, first of all, that I don't consider you a no, and I know that you consider you a no. But if you have an exception, the extreme circumstance exception, then you're a yes, because the death penalty itself is an extreme measure for extreme circumstances. So you can your debate becomes what are the circumstances that would require it.
Yeah, good luck finding that.
Right, but I think that Chase's position is far more consistent because it's just no ever.
I don't think there. I mean, just because our emotions say that said situation is the right one, you're just saying that out of emotion. It doesn't mean that person. I mean, ultimately, a person commits a crime or does something wrong for a reason, and that reason usually can be solved. And that's how I feel about anything that's been done, so to speak. So if you're saying, well, just kill him, what are you trying to solve other than now soothing your emotions in that moment? And
right,
even if it's an extreme situation.
Right. So here's the problem, though, and it's I also wanted to address Matt with this one too, and you also, Chase, because Chase, in your case, you just have a Pollyanna view of the justice system. Because the justice system you described just doesn't exist. And Matt, you might actually live in a country with that justice system, and the rest of us just don't know it. So I can't accuse you of having a Pollyanna view of the justice system. You will have to inform me. But I can tell you what I know of our justice system in this country. It's hell. In fact, it's designed to be hell. It's not designed to do anything good for anyone. And even if you bring in some out of date library books in there, and let people get their GED online, it's not a system that's actually set up to do anyone any good. Um, Also, the thing that is pitted against the death penalty is death in prison um, without parole.
So,
That's the other choice. And so it's, you say, well, if we kill them, then we've given up on them. But
well,
the
I would
moment
say
you say
why
that a
this.
person has to live the rest of their existence in prison and there is no legal hope for parole, you've also given up on them. And so
That's
it's
not what
not
I'm
as
saying. Why is there not a conversation of our, I mean, because I don't think that, I literally think the conversation of the death penalty is literally the conversation of our justice system, of any justice system for that matter. If our other solutions, the other options are just as bad as the death penalty, then we also need to be talking about the other option, because if we're basically we're just talking about two death penalties then.
no, that's right. Well, and I agree with you.
And so it means we
So
need to be talking about, I mean, the other basically, why, I mean, to me, it'd be sounding like we're too lazy to now change the other half. And like, I don't think that that's a
so we're
problem.
gonna talk about that, and we're gonna fix the system before the show is over. But right now, but right
At
now,
least get
we have to
close.
deal with the system that we have for the moment. In the system that we have, the choice, but whenever the death penalty comes up, it's not 20 years in prison or the death penalty. It's life in prison without parole or the death penalty.
Mm.
So it's death either way. And if you say, well, but if you kill them, society's given up on them. They've given up on them anyway. They're not coming
Right.
out. It's without parole. And so in that case, what you're saying is you can own this person basically for the rest of their natural life, and they have no say in what happens to them. They are your sadistic slave, essentially. And nothing good can come out of that system because you're not rehabilitating. Why are you going to rehabilitate someone who is
While
never
you're
going
right,
to reenter the population?
while you're right, I guess I couldn't give you a solid answer because I just don't believe that we can never talk, like essentially just saying that's it is saying that there is no conversation to be had on the other.
I agree with
It's
you.
hard for me to just, I guess,
I
assert an opinion
agree
that
with
I
you,
wouldn't hold in that, even in that situation.
but this
I would
is
just
the
be,
system we have, not the
right.
system that we wish we
And
had.
even that system we have, like, just to say that like these are the two, we're still just ignoring it. Like you just, I'm saying that you really can't ignore it. There's no way around it, because I essentially, if we're saying we're sentencing both persons to death, my opinion is like, no, we shouldn't be sentencing a person to death. When we shouldn't be, essentially, my opinion, we shouldn't be giving up on people. And like that's essentially what you're saying is like, well, should you give up on people and give up on people? No, just no.
Right. Well, those are the only two options that are usually posed with the death penalty. Matt, do you see where I'm coming from, or do you?
I do absolutely see where you're coming from, and I'm tempted to agree. I'm there's something that's blocking me from going amen to that, and it's because I have probably a more what's the word I'm looking for? I have a more glittered look on what prison should be, and prison should be a situation where, yes, people are removed from society for the protection of society, but that should also be a period of time where that person is prepared through whatever means, like I said, re-education, counselling, or whatever, so that they can be a better person in society. And it may be that actually prison, our whole attitude towards prison is wrong, and that prison is seen as a retributive punishment rather than a progressive punishment. For example, somebody does a crime, this crime warrants however many years in prison, 100 death penalties, whatever it is, 100 life sentences is the sort of thing that's being handed out here in the UK. And that is what you say, that's effectively you're locked up until you die. But what is life like during that time? And I think that retributive attitude towards prison sentencing needs to be rethought. That is not the right way to go about prison. And the death penalty has come out of that. It's a retributive punishment. It is a punishment fit the crime kind of thing, which is straight out of the Bible. And I think that at its bottom line is utterly wrong. People, yes, if somebody is is a terrible person and has committed a terrible crime, and their mental attitude is such that they need to be separated from the population for everybody's safety, then yes, let's remove them from the population and put them somewhere. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to make them a better person for society. And if they've killed 20 people, should they really be locked up till the end of their life? Can we turn that person around and make them into a better person? And if we can, then we should entertain the conversation that that person could be released back into society, no matter how uncomfortable that might make us.
Okay, so you guys are just insisting that I move this conversation forward to the second half, and I haven't gotten enough blood out of the first half.
I'm
So,
too nice. I'm
I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
I'm trying to work with you, but there's no way
You are
that
not
we can
working
just
with me.
eliminate Marvel.
You were not. You were. I knew this would happen. So
I'm too
I
realistic.
understand. I understand that you're both of you, and you in the chat. By the way, I see you. I see you. Um, by the way, Matt, you're supposed to be keeping up with that. Don't leave those poor chatters hanging out by themselves. They're trying to wreck the show. I really, next season, I'm going to find a way to let everybody participate in the chat. Everybody, all the listeners. That's going to be fun. Shoot me some ideas about platform people who are technically inclined. I've been thinking about some things there. Here's the thing that I have to nail down before we move to the fantasy portion of the show. The thing that I have to nail down is the hard, unspoken, unspeakable reality of what prison is today, right now, and what the law is today, right now. And so we do not have the luxury right now to think about what we should be doing or what we could be doing differently 20 years, 30 years later, or if we could somehow possibly make everyone see sense. We have to deal with the law right now. None of us are kings, and we cannot just snap our fingers and make laws better. So we have to deal with the now. And the now, the horror of the now, is that prison is a system, a machine that grinds away at one's humanity until it is completely stripped away. It is a dehumanizing machine. That is what it is right now. Now, maybe there are some other countries, and you can tell me, Matt, if it's different where you are. But American prison is a place where you get a bad bunk to sleep in, bad medical treatment, bad food, daily ass rape. It's beat up continually, and you are dragged into one gang faction or another, and whatever humanity you went into prison with, it is gone in a relatively short period of time. That's prison. Prison is our best estimation of hell. I remember several years ago, Sheriff Fife, not a TV character, some of you might recall Sheriff Fife in Arizona, who ran a prison. I think he was a sheriff. And it was extremely hot, and no air conditioner or anything like that. And Arizona is as close to hell as you get on Earth. If you've ever been to Arizona, you know that you'll never go back again willingly, especially in the summer. Just don't. This was a feature of the prison. It was hellish. They were proud of their prisons. Yesterday on the show, Travis, very gentle hearted Travis, and I'll give him a chance to speak to this when I talk to him today. He was saying in defense of not having the death penalty, and I let it go because death penalty wasn't the topic yesterday, but he was saying in the defense of life in prison that it's worse than death. And so we should want that punishment. Well, no, actually, that we should not want that punishment. But yeah, when I hear Christians say things like they're against the death penalty, it's often because they think that the torture is better. And I agree with you, Matthew, that our whole system of justice, we will get to this in a minute, I promise, does come from a very Christian notion of without blood, there can be no forgiveness. And if you sin, somebody has to pay. And there has to be an eye for an eye. And if you do something bad must be done to you. It is a retributive idea of justice. I agree with that. But whether we like it or not, that's what we have today. And so when we're comparing the death penalty to not the death penalty, what you're saying is we will either kill the person humanely or we will put them in a torture chamber for the rest of their life. Those are the only two choices you have right now. And you don't get to choose from your fantasy where the world is different.
I would say it's not so much a protest of a fantasy of a world. It's saying that with that decision, I'm now taking on the responsibility of making sure that the world that I'm now making them wait for, I'm going to make happen. Because essentially,
I'm never going to win you over, Chase. I can say that.
but if there's, but if we're talking about a world in which I mean, essentially that pretty much is this world in which I have no power to change anything. Yeah, I mean, in talks of subject, I mean, I believe that a lot of cases subjecting a person to obviously suffering is way worse than subjecting them to death, because suffering without suffering with intention to kill is way worse than just killing. Or sorry, torturing with intention to kill without with torturing without intention to kill is way worse than just killing.
All right, I'm going to consider that a win. Matt, you want to join my side too, or do you want to stay
Not
stubbornly
particularly.
on the wrong side of the issue?
It's not me who's in the wrong, but there we go. There's a comment in the.
I see how this is going to go.
It just sounds like you don't want to get into the discussion of what we really need to do, David.
We are. I promise. That is a discussion I want to have. I just want to.
It's problem solved.
I just want to fully explain to the audience where my support of the death penalty is, and so, I will spend the rest of the show unraveling it and taking it down. I promise.
There's a comment in the chat that mentions the victim. If the death penalty satisfies the victim and gives the victim some kind of closure or peace following the crime, is that worthwhile having a death penalty?
No.
I agree.
Yeah. In fact, I would say that if any part of your quote unquote justice system is to make the survivors feel better about the bad thing you did to the perpetrator, your system of justice, your idea of justice is warped. You are no better than a caveman.
But isn't that part of the whole punishment thing, that the victim gets to be appeased because the perpetrator got punished?
It is, but I don't believe in punishment. So
now you've gone off the reservation.
Oh no, I started off on the reservation, off the reservation. But we're gonna go further off the reservation. So I'm going to flip the switch and go where Chase wants to go, so that we can explore this side of it, and I think where you want to go, Matt, as well. And we will pick up with my idea that punishment is a bad idea. But what I am going to do in the meantime, it looks like
you're not a parent, are you?
No, but we'll discuss.
There you go. You'll change your mind about punishment.
Andrew has a raised hand, and I knew that he had some things to say. So Andrew, if you want to maybe cover your thoughts on the first half of this discussion, please do so, because the second half is going to go very differently.
Well, I think I'll start where you just left off. I don't think I could find a place in my life where I thought there was no room for punishment of any kind. We have pain mechanisms that are built into us evolutionarily, right? To teach us what is wrong. Now, for the Christian listeners, I'm not supporting corporal punishment. What I am saying is that there are things that happen to us, and there are things that we do, as Matthew said, even with our children, that are punishment. It is designed not to be retributive, but to provide correction. So maybe you're about to draw a distinction between the notion of punishment and correction. If so, I'd be interested in that. But I'll leave it here.
I will be.
Oh, okay, so I thought that you might, and I will simply say that for myself, I think that punishment and correction may very well be the same thing from time to time. You could draw a distinction between them. I think that's fine, but I hope to hear that part of the conversation, and I'll just leave it there because I think that was the most interesting thing said so far.
Really? 30 minutes into the show, and you thought the most interesting thing was the last thing? Okay, you
Well,
may go
short-
back on
short
mute, sir.
attention
My
span,
memory,
that's what that
my
is.
memory says there's only been 3 minutes of show so far.
I see. The 3-minute theme has come up again. There's some pre-show, but audience, don't worry about it. Just
You
don't.
let your imaginations run wild.
Yeah.
Is that your coffee with the creamer in it?
No creamer. No creamer. I love the
You've
earth.
been turned.
Yeah. No, this is black. Nothing white is ruining this coffee. People, I'm just
Awesome.
repeating things. I don't put people put words in my mouth, and I just say them. Okay. Don't
Was
don't
that like
blame
an
me
ad
for
or
the-
something?
That's all right.
Don't
Did I
blame
ma-
me for
did
the
I
things
put-
I say.
Did I put the idea into your mind that being
It-
white
it's
was a bad
possible.
thing?
Yeah, I don't look. My wife is white, and now I don't know how I think about her. I feel so. Is the mic still on? So
Right, yeah,
what
back
we're
to death penalty. It's much better subject.
much better,
Let's
safer,
keep you up in the.
safer. So yeah, let me go there. I said it. I'm against punishment. But does that mean I'm against correction? No. So obviously we're dealing with something that's maybe semantic in nature, but I think it's slightly more than semantic. It's not just wordplay, but it starts with semantic. So in the same way that our conversation about prison is a little bit semantic, I believe in institutionalization, but I don't believe in prison. Because prison connotes a certain type of idea that is unhealthy. And I think that we should wash it from our mind. Saying death in prison without parole is semantic, maybe, because I think that life in prison without parole is a misnomer. And so I think that some of these semantic differences are important. And so when I say correction or instruction, some of that might look like punishment, but it's a change of mindset. And I think that's what we have to address next here, which is the retributive idea of justice. It is the idea that if you do something bad, then what needs to happen to balance the scales, by the way, there are no scales. If you do something bad, there's no way to undo it. Okay, it's been done. Time only moves in one direction. But the idea is if you do something bad, then we're going to do something proportionally bad to you, and that will balance things out, and that equals justice. And that is punishment. If you eat a cookie before dinner and we have told you not to, we are going to get you back for that in some way and make you suffer in some way because you did a bad thing. That is what I do not believe in. And so if there is a good reason for a child not to eat a cookie before dinner, then you should be working toward that good with good reasons and good motivations. You should not be treating your child like a lab experiment, saying, well, if I give him enough electric shock, he won't eat the cookie. Maybe what should happen is you should put the goddamn cookie away in a place where he can't get to it. Because what you should care about is your child not eating a cookie before dinner, as opposed to some power play of, I'm going to make you obey me. And when you don't, I'm going to zap you with the punishment zapper. And I think that that's what passes for a lot of parenting, because I hear parents talk like that. In terms of punishment in our justice system, I feel the same thing happening. It's, you did something bad, you sold some drugs to some people, and so now we're going to do something bad for you. We're going to have you dehumanized for 10 years. And so it's not something that's additive to the world. It's not something intended to improve someone. It's your zapper. You've dialed in the right amount of zappage for sold some drugs to some people. That's just the wrong idea to start with, and you're never going to get a system of the kind of justice that we are thinking about on this show if your underlying idea is you do something bad, so we do something bad to you in return. Anybody?
I agree. Yeah. So what you're describing there as punishment is probably what I would call at the top end retributive punishment. There are other lesser things that I would call punishment, but you probably call it something slightly different. So I imagine once we've ironed out the semantic differences, we probably actually largely agree.
Yeah, I mean, if you have let's say you have an infant, a newborn. Andrew has been through this, probably more recent than any of us. Full disclosure, I was a foster parent once upon a time. I had a little one. I have not gotten back into the foster parenting game, but my wife and I have talked about it. We might one day. So I'm not completely unfamiliar with the topic of parenting, even though I don't have any kids right now. So that said, you have a newborn, the baby is going to cry a lot. I mean, it's their job. And they take their career seriously. They take it very seriously. And the crying gets old real fast. And I don't care what your maternal instinct is, there ain't enough Excedrin to make you enjoy that sound every 10 minutes at night. It's, that's a bad thing. But if you tried to punish a child, an infant, for crying, you would be a monster. You're saying you're doing a bad thing and I'm going to do a bad thing to you to stop you, whatever you think the right amount is. No one would ever do that who is fit to be a parent. Now, what they might do is try to settle the child's fears or pains or whatever the child is experiencing so that they are not crying. But it's not, I'm going to stop you I'm going to get you back for what you're doing. And yet 2-year-olds sometimes cry. And we start feeling different about it because, well, they're 2. You should know better. Shut up, you little monster. We go from, oh, you sweet little thing, what can I do to shut up? We call the 2s terrible, the terrible 2s. And, they get to be 5 and they're having, some type of emotional crisis. And then we're, it seems like as we progress through life, the parent forgets that it's not about doing a bad thing to your child to make them stop doing a thing. It's about meeting the need that the child has so that they don't need to do the bad thing. And we forget that as children get older until before you know it, it's all just punitive. And I think that is backward and twisted. I would love to hear from one of you who has children, not you, Chase, because you don't have any.
No,
You have probably never been a foster parent. I'm just gonna take a guess on that. Andrew, you want to come back in on that? Is there ever a point, if we can say retributive punishment is wrong at infancy, that it becomes right at some point in the future?
No, it never becomes right I not only have I got experience of being a parent, I've got experience of being a child, and I was brought up in quite in a missionary environment in Zambia. It's been mentioned multiple times. The boarding school I was at in Zambia had very strict punishment regime, and I spent a lot of my preteen years in fear of doing the wrong thing in case I got punished. And that was not only at boarding school, but also sometimes at home. And I vowed that no child of mine would ever suffer like that, the way I suffered, because it's not a pleasant experience living in fear that you might accidentally do something wrong and then get punished for it. That is not a pleasurable experience to live. And I have gone out of my way to have a child that does not have a life like that. And I believe I'm right that my daughter is a much happier teenager than I ever was. And that is absolutely the way I want it to be.
Yeah, I just want to echo every bit of that. The idea that as a parent, I would somehow get even with my child for doing something that I thought she shouldn't do is repugnant to me. And I hope it's repugnant to everybody listening that has children. And if it's not repugnant to you and you're considering having children, please don't. There is, even if you call it punishment, you can call it correction and not punishment or whatever, but whatever it is, when you take corrective action against your child, the root of that idea should never be retribution. And in fact, when we do that, we have social mechanisms to correct the parent, right? And we should have those mechanisms. However, I will say that there are times as a parent when your child maybe is not crying, but whining, right? And we do want to move children along through their phases of childhood so that they're not crying for the moon, so that they're not doing things that are unreasonable, right? And so we're not out to punish children, but as parents, we do have the responsibility to have them become adults at the time that we're no longer responsible for them. So it's a big job, and you're not going to get it right every time. But getting even with your children, hopefully that's not on anybody's mind.
Okay, so while you're there, just stay open for a little bit. I'm going to tie all this together, I promise. There's a notion that you and I had, Andrew, and I suspect you too, Matthew, as a Christian. Chase, were you a Christian at one point?
Yes, I was.
Then you probably also grew up with this notion: spare the rod, spoil the child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's bullshit.
that's it is, and I'm gonna go ahead and speak for everyone and say none of us believes that is a good idea. In fact, it was a bad idea when it was said, and if that represents God as a parent, then I want to know where the Cosmic Child Services is, because his parental rights should be removed. But that said, there's this idea out there that if you do not, in fact, beat your children in some way and cause them some pain and punishment and retributive justice for their wrong, then they will not know the difference between right and wrong. And what I suggest is if you beat your child every time they do something that is childlike, they will grow up beating other people and thinking that retributive justice is exactly the way to go. You will simply train another monster. Now, that said, I am going to full disclosure here, and I love my mother and father very much. I just want to say that. And they have, I would say, repented for the way they brought us up. But I grew up being beaten by loving parents. and not beaten with fists in not that, but I was beaten with belts. We just call them whippings. But a whipping is not that much better than being tied to a tree and having your back exposed and being beaten with a cat of nine tails. Um, well, it's better in that not as much damage can be done with a belt. But let me assure you that when a blind man has you by the arm and is swinging a belt at you at whatever part of the body you can hit, a lot of damage gets done. I grew up that way. I grew up that way. And that to me was normalized. And furthermore, everybody I knew grew up that way. Most of the people that I knew as a kid are probably either dead or in jail right now. And so I was one of the lucky ones. That was a common thing. And in school, if you're young, this may be new to you, Chase. I don't know if you're familiar with a thing called paddling. But
I
when I
am.
was in school, paddling was a thing. And what a paddling is it's a piece of wood. If it was cleverly made, specifically designed to cut through the air with great efficiency and leave as much damage as possible to a child's behind. And you issue as many strokes as you possibly can until you become exhausted. And then you release the child and they have been properly punished. Where I grew up, parents were in favor of paddling. In fact, they used to say things like, "Not, if you get a paddling in school, then you're going to get a whipping when you get home." And so it was always double trouble. This is how I was raised. Andrew, you were raised at least part in the same place and time as I was. We moved around a lot, but same region. What was your experience? And you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to.
Sorry, ask me the question again.
Oh, did you hear any of what I just said?
Yes, I just
Okay,
missed it.
then I was just asking, what was your experience, and you don't have to say if you don't want to.
With growing up in the place and time that we did.
Yeah, with regard to corporal punishment.
Yeah, so I won't go deeply into it, but yes, I had the same experience you did. There was this idea that whipping us with something impersonal, like a belt or a paddle or a switch, or frankly, just about anything else that came to hand. There was this notion that as long as a parent or a teacher or a neighbor or a parent of a friend, right, as long as they did it with something impersonal, the beating was somehow better. That the child wouldn't wouldn't make the same connection, right? The same emotional connection between you're the person that is supposed to be uh, guiding me, certainly, but also demonstrating good example for how to live as an adult, right? And so there was this silly idea, at least in my view, it's pretty silly, that as long as you're hitting a kid with a belt or a switch or a paddle, it's better than hitting them with your hands.
Right, right. And notice the language that we use: whipping, paddling, switching. But if you just substitute that for hitting with a weapon, um, it takes on the grisly truth of what it is. And in that sense, kind of worse than hitting with a hand. you're still being hit. You're just being hit with a weapon that leaves more than bruises, but uh, uh, raised and open whelps that last for a long time. And if you get this kind of beating 2 days in a row, well, then you have whelps on top of whelps. Um, anyway, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Well, I don't have much more to say about it except this. Um, there will be plenty of people listening who will think that I am wrong. But when we see a child crying, most of us object and think that child should be comforted. That whatever is causing the problem should be solved. I find it incongruous as a parent to think that that I should somehow feel differently if my child is crying and I'm the one that caused it because I hit her. It is just the most cognitively dissident idea that I have in my head, that I would normally correct why she was crying. But somehow if I made her cry because I hit her, I should feel differently about that. And I think most of us will think about it and say, yeah, that seems strange that if I hit a child, I should feel differently about their crying. We have this idea that would be wrong, but we have this sort of societal structure that says, spare the rod and spoil the child, right? And those two things are in conflict, and we should think carefully about them, because one of them is wrong, and I'm willing to lay my money on which one it is, and that is hitting your child with anything that is smaller than your thumb is still hitting your child.
So let me before I go to Matt, I just want to turn to the chat for a moment. I have mentioned other people in the chat. I don't think he'll mind. Dale has joined us in the chat, and he's had a lot of interesting things to say. There's a comment here, Dale. If you are of a mind, I'd appreciate it if you drop it on the board, or if you'll allow me to just copy it and paste it and put it in there for people to read. I think it's important. And also, Dale, if you would like, I see you've got a hand. Okay, thumb up there for Dale. Dale, would you like to come in and just give your comment while you're there? It would be I'd be open to that.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I was just interested in your take, because you say you don't agree with punishment at all, and you would rather go for actions of correction and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to throw in, some philosophers of law take what's called an expressivist theory of punishment. So people like Alec Whalen, that's not supposed to be Alex, but it's Alec with a C, and Joel Finberg. And they lay out 4 conditions for punishment, 3 of which we've kind of already discussed. But then there's also this 4th necessary condition where punishment becomes punishment when you're expressing censorship or condemnation of the wrongful act. So it's not so much about, for them, it's not so much about retribution against the criminal. It's about sending this message about the act. And they quote research by psychologists and that sort of thing that say that only by doing punishment, where we're actually doing action to impose something on the person, and or at the very least withdraw a benefit that someone would otherwise have, and it's in the context of sending a message of what you did was wrong, you need to pay for that wrongful action. That's the only thing that psychologically works for humans, whereas just doing correction, like saying, next time you need to do that, you shouldn't do this, next time do this, doesn't have the same psychological impact as punishment. So that's their argument as to why punishment would be necessary. And I just wanted to, what do you make of something like that?
Yeah, I appreciate you chiming in with that. So I don't think that it makes it better. So it's kind of saying that the only way we can know that something is um, good, as in socially beneficial, or bad, as in socially harmful, is to apply some type of uh, some type of punitive action. Otherwise, they won't get the message. And I think it's an intuitive thought. So I'll give you that, but it's an unevolved thought. It's the kind of thought that a caveman would have. It's not the kind of thought that we should have as an evolved society. And this is one of these areas where I think that religion is responsible for holding us back from our full potential of social and moral evolution. Because religion is stuck in the mode of thinking that the only way you can tell a society that this is wrong is to send a strong punitive message. I think this is part of why God favored something like stoning, for instance. Stoning was not a private act; it's a public act, and he got the whole community of men involved in the stoning. And if you're 12 years old and considered a man, probably you get to participate in killing somebody when you're 12. I think it's God's way of saying this is wrong and everybody needs to see it's wrong, and if you do it, this is what awaits you. So I just fundamentally disagree with the notion that the only way to send a message that a thing is a good thing or a harmful thing is then to visit something harmful on another person. Because I think the only thing that you teach is when someone does something that you think is bad, you should hurt them. And we have a culture that shows that that's actually the message being received. That's if that's the message that you're trying to give, our culture says mission accomplished.
Cool. Thanks for answering that. One thing just to follow up, I believe it's interesting because there's actual science that backs it up. Cognitive psychology studies in cognitive psychology have been said to back it up and that sort of thing. So that's why I wanted to throw that out there for you.
I do appreciate it, and I wrestle with it. I can tell you though, Dale, I'm not a better person because I was beaten as a child. I'm a worse person. I can think of several ways that I'm a worse person because I was beaten as a child. And so I did learn a lot about what my parents thought was wrong, but I didn't learn what was actually wrong. I just learned what they liked and didn't like. It's a little bit like a person who trains a dog but who doesn't know anything about dog training. And so you can beat a dog into behaving the way you want the dog to behave. That can work. But the dog doesn't actually learn anything except what triggers you and what doesn't. And what we're trying to do with humans is do something more useful than that. We're trying to help people become complete and fully emotionally, morally mature. And in visiting violence on them, I think even if you can say, well, that has some limited efficacy, I think that at the end of the day, what you're teaching them is the wrong thing. You're just training them in terms of, if you do this, then this will happen. And therefore, they will also think, well, someone else did that, so they should also get the bad thing that happens. And it becomes a invirtuous cycle that never ends. At some point, it has to end. And we have to stop. We have to put down the justice zapper that says, you did this bad thing, so we'll dial up this much zap. Hey, Matthew, I haven't heard from you in a bit.
Somebody earlier on in the chat said something about Norway having a maximum prison term of 21 years. So excuse me. While the other chat's been going on, I've just gone and done a quick fact check on that, and that does appear to be the case. But what I have also brought up, and I've not had time to read it, so if you put into your search engine of choice the phrase, how Norway turns criminals into good neighbors, you'll find a 2-year-old article on the BBC News website talking about the Norway system. It confirms 21 years as a maximum prison sentence and goes into what it is that Norway does to try to turn criminals into good neighbors. Like I said, I haven't read it, so I don't know what the content is. I don't know what surveys or studies they might reference during that article, but it just seemed like something that is worth reading, and certainly in the context that we're on. So I just wanted to draw attention to that.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I had, in preparation for the show, thought about things like maximum sentences, and would that solve the problem? So, Chase, we're getting into your part of the show where I know you wanted to start with, but we're getting there now as we round the final lap. It is this idea of, well, what if we set aside the death penalty, and what if we also set aside death in prison with no possibility of parole? What if we made it 20 years? In fact, 20 years was the number that I was playing with in my mind. If we do not reform the prison system, I think we would be creating an even bigger mess if we did that. And so the first thing you have to do is reform the system. And that's what we're about to talk about. But if you just send someone to an inhumanity camp for 20 years, and then you release them back out in society, you have not helped them or society. What you have done is you've made a monster, and then you've put him out on the street.
Yeah.
And the thing that I want people to think about in this reality of prison, I've had a little bit of familiarity with prison. I've never been to prison, the big house per se, but I have been in jail for something that I didn't do. I was there for 3 days before I was let go. That's a story I don't talk about too much, and I'm not going to give you the details about it now. I would say that race may have played a part of that, but that's a story for another time, I think. But my father was heavily involved in prison ministries, and I've done work with and around prisons, although prison ministry wasn't my particular focus. I've been a part of it loosely and around it a lot. So one of the realities of prison is something that people almost never think about, which is release from prison. So let's just imagine for a moment, you've gone to prison, you've been there for 20 years, and you get the call and you're finally released. Yippee, I'm free. Your first reality is you have no clothes. Second, you have no money. Third, you have no job. Fourth, you have no transportation. Fifth, you have nowhere to lay your head. You are outside of the prison, and what some places do is they'll provide you with a bus ticket to somewhere. But even so, when you get off the bus, you still have none of the above things that I've mentioned. What are you most likely to do when you find yourself standing outside of the jail with nothing? Well, the only thing you can do is try to collect, because you have no money, someone from your past life that might take you in for the night. If it's not a parent, it's probably going to be with the criminal element that got you in jail in the first place. Also, you have gotten to know many criminals in jail, and some of them have gotten out before you. And you've learned some useful skills while you're in jail that will be useful in your new life. Like, for instance, what job are you going to get so that you can pay the rent of the apartment that you don't have and can't get? Well, you probably, I suspect they're taking applications for drug dealer. There are some gangs that could probably use a hitman. All kinds of good career options for you. You can maybe go knock over a liquor store and get a little money so that you can find somewhere to stay the night. Your options are so limited in our current system, by the way, may be different in other places. I hope it is. That I don't, once again, the 20-year option only works if you change the very idea of what prison is.
I feel like the only way that it's even, I guess the only way people are able to only way people here in America are able to be okay with this because they just assume that when you walk out of that prison that you have somebody who's going to pick you up with that car. And I think really it's just there's never a conversation or realization that not almost a lot of people don't have somebody, especially like in today's age when you're talking about 20 years of removal, and no one ever brings up the fact that in that 20 years it's not like you're in there learning what the world is continuing to change. Like you get maybe bits and snippets, but phones is a simple in a year a phone changes. So you come out one day with a click phone, next thing you know you're touching a screen. Touching a screen, I'm always amazed. I myself regularly use. I just got a new phone the other day, and it does 10 other new things I didn't know that Android phones can do. A person in prison was picking up a singular company that doesn't even exist anymore, a flip phone, and now they're talking about the iPhone X, whatever. And so, I don't even see how there's even a realistic idea of how a person can think to be a part of society again when the idea of taking someone out of society completely takes them out of society and whole part.
What's it like over in Britain, Matt? What happens when a person gets out of prison after 20 years?
I absolutely do not know. This is probably something I need to find out. I've got no experience of our prison system here in the UK. The only thing I know categorically that's different to your prisons is that our prison system is not run by private companies for profit, which I think is.
What do you think that's a bad thing?
I think that has something to do with the cyclical process that we've definitely developed. That's for sure. Something about I know people who have been in there for just less than 20 years who they've easily go right back because just like what David said, the only people they know is people from there, and the system set up to say you shouldn't be interacting with them, which is, I don't know how you can say that when you know that that's the only people that they know. And also we loosely define once at that point, once you've committed a crime and been gone to the prison system, now we really loosely define how stringent we're going to be on the people they're interacting with as far as crimes go and how far back we're looking at. A person literally can be, if we want to be petty enough here in America, we'll find the friend that has jaywalking that they're staying with and say, oh, time to go back. You messed up your parole.
We do have a parole system here, but I just don't know what the rules are about it at all. I would hope that there's some kind of preparation period for people before they come back out of prison. That they give an advance warning and that there's time spent with them, that maybe some effort is put into finding either somewhere to live or talk to somebody about a job. I would hope that these things are in place. Certainly if I was in government or had a position in government, that's the sort of thing I would want to see put in place, but I genuinely have no idea whether we have that in place here in the UK.
Right. Well, your state of being unaware about that reality is not unique. People aren't aware of the reality here, except for the fact that there are a lot of people here who knows someone who's been in prison. And they know someone who's come out of prison. That's the only way they actually know the reality of it. It's a hidden thing that we don't talk about. And so let's go ahead and round the corner and build a better society, shall we? So let me finish my thoughts on this by explaining why the death penalty is a bad idea and why I'm against it after spending the whole show defending it. So I agreed with both Matt and Chase at the beginning of the show, but I thought there was a lot of ground that we needed to cover before we got to where we are now. And so where we are now is allowing ourselves to step back from the current reality and looking forward to what could be and imagining what should be a better system, a better way of doing it. So for me, it starts with removing the concept of retributive justice altogether. In the same way that we don't beat a newborn for crying, I don't think you should beat a 16-year-old for stealing. There are problems, there are underlying problems that cause all of those things. And that doesn't change as a person grows older. It's just that at a certain age, we stop caring about the underlying problems. And so I would desire a society that does not stop caring, as ours tends to do. Secondly, I believe that we should remove the term prison because of its bad connotations and its connection to punitive, retributive behavior. And I don't know what word I would put in its place, but I'm going to use the word institution for now. I believe that there are people, many people, who should be, I'm going to remove the word sentenced, because once again, that has those connections too, who should be assigned to life in an appropriate institution. And when I say life, I'm not saying it euphemistically like the people who say life in prison without parole. I'm talking about actual life. And by life, I simply mean the best possible life that a person in their condition can live that would be good for them and society. It's the best possible life we can give a person. Now, I know that when a person has committed a crime, especially a crime that harms you or someone you love, the last thing you're thinking about is, how can I give this person the best possible life? But I think that we have to round the corner of our moral evolution and begin to think that way. Because it's clear that the best possible life for someone who is, I'll use loosely the term criminally insane, the best possible life for them is not a life where they are hacking and slashing and slaying and raping in society. That's bad for them. It's bad for society. That's not a good life. But the best possible life for them is also not a hellish torture chamber of a cage that they have to be in for the next 40 to 60 years of their death. So it's always with a mind to this new institution that I am thinking of as, what can we do, to rehabilitate this person, to save this person from whatever it is that's wrong with them. If we recognize that we have not the technology to do that, then it's a matter of saying, okay, well, if this person is going to live, what is the highest level of life they can achieve? And then we figure that out and we try to set that up. Now, I think there are reasons why we don't do that. There are two reasons mainly. The first reason is because we're just animals. We are animals and we don't want someone who's caused us to suffer to have the best possible life. And I think that's part of it. We just have that retributive mindset that says you are going to burn in hell for that. And we want to make sure that that happens. The second thing is, even if you wanted to create a world like an institution like what I'm thinking of, it's expensive. It's expensive. You think that your 27% tax rate is high now. Oh, this kind of institution would be very expensive. because we are also bumping up against some of my notions, what I've spoken of in other shows about the minimal minimal unit of humanity that we would allow, and to make sure that people do not fall below that. Well, that's going to cost a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of time, and so we don't have the moral will to do it, and we don't have the financial ability to do it. And I don't know what the solution is for creating this institution that is geared toward making people the best version of themselves that's possible, as opposed to putting them in a cage and dehumanizing them. Dehumanizing them is a lot cheaper and it's a lot more satisfying. The other thing is hard and it's expensive. So let me hear from, let's start with Chase. You and I have the same utopic vision, but I fully admit that I have no idea how to make it happen. Can you do better?
I have no perfect path, but I have some ideas. I mean, for one, it's the thought that, is it really more expensive? For like, we're saying it's just because it's going to cost to take care of a person, the cost that we they end up now having because we don't take care of people is way higher. We pay for things like we pay for things like hurt criminals now committing further offenses due to the system that now neglected them, or people who are soon to be criminals before reaching that point, you know, going all out so they can, not reach this terrible system that we have approaching them. So in the long run, the system we have is really costing us more than it would be just to help people. So I think that's for starters, it's a mindset. It's, is it really costing us more to just help as opposed to what it's already costing us to neglect? And then on top of that, when we're talking about these corrective facilities, like from going inside, you're just being forgotten. It's you, the people who are also in trouble with you, and the disciplinary. That gets you nowhere. Sometimes you can see this depicted. You may have counseling sessions, whatever, but they're usually not productive ones. They're not looking to reach an end. They're looking to waste time until they can now let you go because you cost money for them in that regard. But they were actually never using that money in a productive sense in the first place. So if you had spent more time sending in the therapist who's going to analyze the guy who had to go and rape a woman and figure out why he felt that way in the first place, go through his past, make him deal with that past, so that way when he comes back into the world, and create simulated worlds simulated societies within prisons. That's not hard to do. You're already wasting time having them, in the past we had them swinging away pickaxes. Now we just have them do little here and there, nothing jobs of just walking through the prison. But create real ecosystems that equally match the ones that they're about to be walking into. We have all types of things that we give to our poor, when really if we change that scaling that we do have in our society and start maybe recognizing the other people who we keep casting out of society, let's move that scale up a bit. So the things like, when Obama phones were a thing, we can give those to prisoners and give the low income people in society a good iPhone, so that way we're changing that scale of what's, and we're also keeping things consistent with what everyone's working with. People aren't having these huge gaps in what everyone's working with to be considered an equal member or a contributing member of society, or having the capabilities to even do so.
Matt, what's your perfect world look like?
Everybody like me.
That's the easy step.
That's the easy step.
I've started with a haircut.
You're gonna have to. I don't know if I'm there.
I'll just
there
go back
yet.
to my coffee. Never mind.
Yeah, we've got to work on you for a bit longer, Chase. Certainly, I echo the comments that you said, Dave. So, David. So echo that. But I would also like to see societal change starting younger. I know people who are involved in education, and they're seeing behavioral traits and behavioral attitudes in the children in their classrooms, which don't really come from experience. They can't come from experience of prison, but they must come from a bad experience somewhere. And typically that's a bad experience at home. And I think we have people who are parents who don't know how to parent. And I think that bad combination brings out people who, or helps rather, to bring out people who don't have a respect for law, who don't have a respect for what it means to act as part of act as a cog in part of a whole society. And so they don't know how to behave, and they come out with these expectations. They leave home with a poor education because they haven't paid it, because they've been disruptive at school, and they don't have a concept of what it is like to behave properly in a civil society. So I would like to see it starting far, far earlier, and actually have a concept of parental education, teaching people how to parent, teaching people how to bring people into a better society. And that probably needs to start at school, actually, in terms of teaching people how to behave, and then teaching people how to teach people how to behave. And people who are having difficulty as parents, I think there needs to be a system in place so that as soon as children are on a list for being problem children, then there needs to be some kind of assistance to the parents on how to teach those people to behave. Because I have heard of situations where the parents are so disinterested and so disconnected from their child's upbringing that they are expecting the school to teach the child how to behave. And that doesn't work, because the children are arriving at school with disrespect for the school environment. And so the school has ceased to be able to influence the children that way. So I'd like to see it start much, much younger, and I'm pretty sure that it needs to happen there. Up at the top end, to get back onto the whole death penalty thing, absolutely the abolition of the death penalty needs to happen, but it needs to be more fundamental than that. Here in the UK, our police force don't habitually carry guns. So when people have an interaction with the police, they don't have to answer the question, do I need to call someone? Is today going to be the day?
Yeah.
Because the police officer that they're talking to isn't habitually loaded, carrying a loaded gun. The police officer that they're talking to isn't on edge because they've pulled them over or having a conversation with them, and they haven't got a hand that's ready to reach for a gun, because that scenario simply doesn't exist. The only police in the UK that carry guns are police at critical places like our airports, and then we have our armed response units, but they only come out when there's a call. They're not habitually roaming our streets.
And like
I
a
think,
SWAT team.
yeah.
Okay.
And I think we have a better society for it. And we don't see the kinds of death by police force that other countries might see. And I think we're better for it.
Yeah, so actually I mean, speaking of the on the gun thing, as far as like how officers, because we already give essentially that death penalty. Yeah, we give that death penalty right here already in America just by giving an officer a gun. I mean, even that idea, like if even if we were to bring the gun conversation into something we're allowing police officers to do, you know, for me, I'm more in the favor of, like, I would definitely take away bullets in general and start putting in rubber bullets, because if we're talking about like what a job of a police officer, even anyone whose job is to protect, even if you feel like you have to kill the person that you're going against, even honestly, your job is also to protect them from themselves. And with a rubber bullet, because like, let's be honest, we're not stupid. A rubber bullet's gonna stop a person. It's not a Nerf gun. It's gonna like you're definitely gonna have a hard time completing that whatever action you're trying to do, being hit by one, and that gives a person plenty of time to now stop them. And also now
we got Nerf guns so good that the Nerf bullets will stop them too.
Yo, to be honest, I've been hit in the face on one of those and been like, hold up. So I mean, it's just this idea that we constantly walk around with this hero idea, this idea that one, killing is wrong, and two, that we should always be looking to be being better than the person who has to kill somebody, but we give what we consider to be our best people essentially the green has to create the hypothetical scenario that it's okay to kill. They make it up every single day.
Yeah.
And so I think that's already wrong. I don't think there should be such thing as giving a person a right to kill, a license to kill, any of that. You know, if we're looking to bring justice, you know, that's a process, and killing is it's very much not a process. It's very quick. Like, you can do it a bunch of different ways, but if you want to talk about helping a person, that's going to take work. And I think even cops, like, you got to do some more work.
So before we completely wrap up, since we don't have a Christian on the panel right now, I just want to reiterate I plan to interview Travis after this show is over, and I might actually delay putting this up for a day or two to give Travis a chance to listen to this conversation so that he can respond to it. But since we do have our host emeritus with us, who is on the dark side, or that is to say, a Christian, um, I wonder if you had some thoughts about what a proper rehabilitation uh, slash productive institution would look like.
Um, yeah, like obviously I don't have the details spelled out. I think that there's a lot of stuff that one needs to know. One needs to be an expert or informed to, have a good answer to this. But yeah, sorry to disappoint you guys, but I think that you guys have raised a lot of points that I think is important. There, it does need to be. I'm a consequentialist, despite how I'm coming across in the comments. I don't believe in a retributionist justification for punishment. So I think that by punishing people, we are trying to achieve certain beneficial consequences. And I think there are four of those. So there's, deterrence, quarantining dangerous people from society and that sort of thing, reforming the criminal. So, David J. and you guys have spoken to certain measures that might foster, that goal. But in addition, I think what retributionists are going for is there's this consequence of reforming the victims. And that's what I really think that retributionists are really wanting to do with this. It's by seeing justice served, it reforms or it restores the damage done to the victim. So these are the four beneficial consequences that we're trying to achieve. And we should adopt policies that are aimed at achieving those consequences. How would that come across in terms of details? I have no idea. I don't work in the, in that system. I leave it to the experts to kind of go over the details as to how we would work that out. But yeah, I think that we have to have these goals, these four goals in mind, and do the best we can to achieve those. In terms of the death penalty, again, I'm going to disappoint you guys. So my answer was yes and no. It depends. So I'm a Canadian. The death penalty is abolished for us. We don't have a death penalty at all. And I think that's good. I don't think that I'm not advocating to bring that back and that sort of thing. But I think that there can be circumstances that justify it. It's in the Bible, and I think it's not good, but I think that that's morally permissible. We had to do that. Otherwise, justice wouldn't be served at all. And, we just have dangerous people going around killing people. We'd have serial killers going free and just doing their thing with no way to stop them or prevent that sort of thing. So in certain circumstances, you have to do that. They didn't have prisons. They couldn't lock people up in a institution that could reform them for life and that sort of thing. So if we do have the means to not to use the death penalty, we should do that. We should uphold the principle of life preservation, but sometimes in certain circumstances, it's necessary. We don't have the option. It's not practically available to us to avoid using the death penalty. So that's what I meant by yes and no there.
Okay, so as you know from your time with me, I am itching to take you up on the theological side of that
Okay.
and beat you senseless. But
Have a
I am
little
going
response.
to I'm going to reframe. I'm reframing. This is the reform to me. You see, I've been in jail and I'm reformed now. I will no longer abuse Christians for their bad theology. Yes, I will, but not on this show. Look, look for me in the comments. I'll have some things, and thank you for sharing that perspective. I do appreciate that. I would say that for some of my time as a Christian, I would have agreed with all of that. So
I am being biblical then. So
yes, yeah, it makes sense from a biblical perspective. but you have to ask yourself the next question of, does the biblical perspective make sense? So in terms of the whole, retribution for the purpose of reform, I will respond to that briefly because I don't need to get into theology about that. I would just say, from a practical standpoint, I think I would see that point better if I saw evidence that it worked. But the evidence of my own eyes and of my own 51 years of life experience says that that harsh prison sentences and bad prison conditions don't make for a better society. Any more than arming everyone with guns does not, in fact, reduce gun violence. It seems to increase it. So where there are lots of guns, there's lots of gun violence. And where there's a lot of retributive punishment, there's a lot of need for retributive punishment. And when I look at other countries, and occasionally I run across a statistic here and there when I'm doing my job, it seems like the countries that do not have death penalties, or that do not have policemen running around with guns and are ready to dole out instant justice, have less crime. And so it would just seem that the human experience has put a different spin on that this idea of retributive punishment in sending a message doesn't work. What seems to work is having less of that. So that may be counterintuitive, but that's the evidence that we have all around us. I just for the sake of fairness, I'll let you come back on that, and you can have the last word on that.
So yeah, so I would just say I disagree that the facts on the end are that reasonable punishment, right? So like I would agree that, yeah, maybe there's reforms. It's we're not accomplishing the goals with the system exactly as it is now. There could be improvements that need to be made. I would definitely agree with that, that we could do better. But in terms of the overall principle that more leniency allows less crime or less repeat offenses or something like that, that's complete bunk. And I've seen that. My brother works for the government, so he can prove with actual things that that's pure horse trash. I know that you guys are kind of Democrats and that sort of thing, but it's just not true. You need to have a firm rules. They're rules that are reasonable, and you enforce those rules. That's how you achieve justice and also deter future crimes and that sort of thing. Because if you are just way too lenient, it encourages repeat offenses. And I mean, we've seen that. There's just so many examples of that going on. You've seen how outraged Teddy gets with like the treatment. Look at how you guys treated the Capitol riots. And I agree with you that went too far. That was wrong. We need to punish them. They violated the law. There needs to be a punishment. You guys are going gung-ho there. But the same needs to be applying to these autonomous known Antifa and BLM and stuff like that. They're going too far. They're doing exactly the same wrong thing, and we need to send a message. We can't be lenient on them.
So can I pause you there for a second, Dale?
Sure.
So I would say that in a lot of these cases, I mean, just because like our country is carrying out a lot of these actions, and in a lot of cases that I wouldn't necessarily in full part agree with. I would say a lot of this disconnect or even outrage when people are not following rules, I would say a lot of times comes in a misunderstanding. I think that rules are put in place in respective of a goal. So if we have a goal in place, we now make rules to achieve that goal. And I think a lot of times we have the same goal, but we misunderstand. Maybe we misunderstand the path in which we want that goal to be achieved, or misunderstanding what we're saying that end goal is in the first place. And through that misunderstanding, they are retaliating. But for us, I don't see how it would become now our responsibility to just, I guess, silence them when all our job is to do is create understanding for them, because that's what we failed to do in the first place. That's why they're doing what they're doing. So if you sat them down and talked to them, explain exactly what your side is, most times the person who's disagreeing with you to the point of outrage will keep coming down to the point of almost agreement. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, I had a very similar thought to what Chase just expressed, but I promised that you would have the last word, Dale.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Chase, on the other hand, did not
Rules
follow
don't
the rules.
apply.
No, I mean,
had
no,
a-
I fully want Dale. I mean, I'm sure Dale like has something. I'm sure he feels.
Chase is
Yeah.
prison for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just say, so agreeing with Chase just very quickly, we haven't been representing the retribution. Even myself, I've misrepresented them in doing the case. Like the retributionist sees, they're kind of like a deontologist in morality, rule based. It's good in and of itself to punish. It's not even about vengeance or something. That's how we've been sort of presenting them. It's kind of this rule based. It's good in and of itself to punish an evildoer, and that sort of thing. Whereas with punishment, I agree with you guys. I'm totally Telios based, end goal based. I don't think punishment in and of itself is good, and I would probably disagree with a lot of Christians on that front. So we do need to achieve that end goal. I agree with Chase on that front. I would just say though, by taking this, we have these rules, and these rules are supposedly conducive to achieving these good ends. It doesn't have to be necessarily that punishment is shutting them down. So we can punish them within the letter of the law, whatever is appropriate for whatever they did, and still listen to their message. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
So, but now we're instilling a sense of fear. They're not ready. When we punish people, you're now teaching them that when you do something, a bad thing is going to happen. When all that's happening is when a disagreement happens, an understanding should come with that, not essentially. I'm really not a rod. I just don't have another way to put it. Like that's it. So we're just saying that we should give them a rod and understanding, but we also know that in understanding, the rod makes understanding a lot harder.
Look, the fact is, I think that you and Dale are not that far apart. What makes it difficult?
I do agree with that.
Yeah, what makes it difficult is that we are fantasizing about a system that doesn't exist, and we're stuck with a system that does exist. And the system that does exist, it doesn't do the thing that even Dale is saying in a deontological kind of way. I think our current system fails at every level. And so we all agree that there needs to be some kind of improvement to the system. And we might have some disagreements over exactly what improvements there needs to be. But yes, rules in and of themselves are not the goal. Following rules is not the goal. The goal is whatever we made the rule for. And so there comes a time when you realize that, well, not every rule is going to work the same way for every individual, and we have to make laws that are kind of fair to everyone to the degree possible. But some laws just aren't going to produce the same result in some people as it will in others, and there's no real good way to have that kind of flexibility in a system of law. And so if you see a group of people that are quote unquote breaking the law routinely, you label them as criminals, as opposed to saying, okay, we're not accomplishing the goal of a better, safer life for you with these laws. Why not? And is there some change in law that we can make that can accomplish that? Because maybe it's a bad law, or maybe it's a bad law for you or the type of people that you represent. So I think that when it just becomes an inflexible, the law is good in a kind of a deontologist way, this actually represents the good. Then we get into this blinder of, if you break the law or don't honor the law, then you are bad. And so I think that's problematic. But having said that, I want to thank everyone for showing up. We're going to move into closing statements, and I'm going to give I'm going to give Andrew 30 seconds to chime, 20 seconds to chime in. Andrew, 10 seconds. Go.
Okay, so I guess the idea that I want to leave with the listeners is really a question. Do you think that we would have a better world when we include more bars, more guns, and more guards? Or would we have a better world where we stopped caring about 18-year-olds and started caring about prenatal care, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, et cetera, and gave them more food, more education, and better social connections? If you think that the latter is better, then all we need to do is start shifting our punitive penal system funding toward early childhood intervention. And then if we have a world where our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds are still lost at 18, then that's the time that we should start talking about a punitive prison system. But let's do a better job. Let's do a better job of saving our children early, because we actually know that it is cheaper to intervene in early childhood than it is to put someone in jail for the rest of their life. So this isn't actually a hard conversation. Which world do you think involves more good? More prisons, more bars, more guns, and more guards? Or better education, more food, and better social connections? I don't think this is all that hard.
Matthew, your closing statement, please.
Right. Well, firstly, David, I didn't say it right at the top. Thank you for tolerating me. I've failed to make your last invitations the last couple of weeks, and you've moved one to a Sunday for me, especially to accommodate me. So thank you for that. All of your listeners should know just how awesome you are for doing that. Right. Closing statements. Here in the Taylor household, we're looking after a young dog. It's come to us from a charity. It broke its leg and the previous owner was unable to look after it. So we're looking after this puppy, barely a puppy, about 11 months old, nearly a year old. And so we're looking after it while it recovers, and then it's going to go on to another home. And we've been given the opportunity to have this dog as a permanent home because we're looking for a replacement dog, because our other one had a stroke and died last Christmas. So, but this dog is not the right dog for us, and I'll tell you why. This dog is really badly behaved. It's so badly behaved that we put it in a crate when we leave the house, because we can't trust this dog free in our house when we're out of the house. It will chew something, it will climb on something, it will break something. So we have to put it in a crate, both for its protection and for our own sanity. This dog is so badly behaved, it doesn't come when we call it. We can hold a treat out, and unless it particularly wants some food, it just won't bother coming when we call it. Walking on a lead is utterly terrible. It just has no control whatsoever. It's this way, that way. It's all over the place. And there is no way we're going to let this dog off a lead, because we have absolutely no idea what will happen. We don't trust it. This dog is so badly behaved that when we're in the living room and we're just relaxed as a family, in order to get some attention, this dog will leave the room, go and find something, either a shoe or a food container off the counter or something from the washing basket, bring it back into the living room, and then start chewing on it in front of us. It won't have the decency to go and do its naughty deeds out of sight. It will come and taunt us with its naughty deeds. And then on top of all of that, when we tell it off, it goes submissive, and it has a submissive wee reflex. So when we tell it off and it goes all submissive, it then leaves a patch of wee on the floor or the carpet, wherever it is that it's done it. So the week that we've had this dog has actually been quite stressful. So in the context of the show, what could that dog do that would justify me taking it outside, putting its lead into a peg in the middle of the garden so it can't move apart from outside of the length of its lead, and leave it there, poorly fed, poorly protected for a couple of days to think about what it's done. And then when that's over, shooting it. Is there anything that that dog can do that would justify me having that response? And if you've said no, congratulations, join us on the side of humanity.
Okay, Chase, in just a moment, I would say I appreciate the kind words, Matthew, and I think that Andrew would echo when I say that you do us the honor of showing up on the show. I would do the show in the middle of the night if it meant having you on the show, and to hell with whoever couldn't join. So
Bless you, sir.
it's very it adds to the conversation in valuable ways. Andrew is lucky to have you as a regular host on his shows. I would pay you to change teams, but I don't make that kind of money. And I honestly don't understand what hold Andrew has over you. I'm thinking there's
It's ugly. I promise you,
cash.
it's it's ugly.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to acquire that. Chase, your final thoughts.
And that is a hard one to follow there. Yeah, no, as far as death penalty goes, I mean, anyone who's listening just needs to if you're saying yes to the death penalty, you need to rethink every conclusion on any situation in which you said yes to where someone needs to die for, and also think of all the possibilities of which you could have helped that person, why they did it. A lot of times we just say yes to the death penalty because we emotionally think it's the right thing to do. And when you take a step back, you realize we as evolved people have already put so many systems in place that we just do not use to make a lot of these ends a lot better. And so I think that saying that wiping our hands and being done with the person, honestly, nearly voids us of our humanity every single time we do it. And that's just simply all I have for that.
Thank you. I don't have anything especially profound to say to close. I think it's all been said. I would ask you to consider a few questions, maybe. If a baby, a newborn, in all its innocence, should be protected, and when they cry and do things that annoy you, they should be helped and loved through that. At what age does that person reach when that is no longer your reaction? At what age do you start sending them a message? At what age is it okay to hit them to make sure that they get it? Well, maybe not 2. Maybe you're human enough to say, no, not 2. They're still too young, too innocent. But somewhere between 2 and 16, they go from being an innocent child that should be protected and taught and lovingly brought into society to a thug that should be tried as an adult. How did that transition happen? How did that happen? Where, philosophically, where does that transition in your mind take place? If meeting their needs and helping them to reach their fullest humanity, even if troubled, we have a term, ADD, and we have medicine. You can talk about whether you should medicate your kids or not, but those quote unquote bad kids, when they're 6 or 7 or 8, we're trying to give them the best humanity possible with better health care, even though they have many behavioral issues already. When does that change? When did that change? When does it flip over to, we are going to try to give you the best humanity possible, to, we're gonna punish you? I don't know. I don't, philosophically, practically, I don't know when that switch flips, when it should flip. I don't think it should flip. And if it never flips, and if we always look at a human being as a person with needs, and when they have a problem, they're a person with needs that aren't met, and that we as a society should try our best to find ways to meet those needs so that that person and every other person has the best humanity possible. When that becomes our goal, I think we no longer need discussions about the death penalty or prison. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the input of everyone involved. I really appreciate you chiming in, Dale. I know that you have very limited time for this kind of thing, and then you get drawn into the board, and then people abuse you. I'm thinking of myself mostly, but and then,
I'm
but
safe. I have no Discus account right now, so I'm safe for the time being.
they're easy to make. They're easy to make.
I have good old Sarah harassing me by email right now. So
just if you see someone on the board with a account name saying "Easy Discuss account," it's probably Dale. So I'm just saying, putting that out there. But I really appreciate you working through the issues that you have to join us when you can and talk about this stuff, especially when it's unplanned. And I appreciate that. Next week, we will be rounding the corner on this particular series. We will be talking about an issue that's even more sobering, if you can think of that, than this one. And that's suicide and euthanasia. I put them together because I think they're two sides of the same coin. Anyone who'd like to be on that show who's not already in the email chain, raise your hand on the board. Just leave a comment, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com, or send me an email, skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. We're going to talk about that. We're going to wrap the season up with Brian and I with a finale. After that, I'm going to try, if you're listening, David Kimball Cook, I'm going to try to squeeze in a show. So we're talking about 2 weeks after this one, roughly, to get back to the historicity of Luke Acts. That's a show that I've been promising to do, and David Kimball Cook is the person to do it with. We had a conversation similar to this before, and we've been waiting for the right time for a round 2. I want to squeeze that in just as kind of a palate cleanser between series, because the next series after this one will be the sex series. And it will not be the kind of juvenile, it'll be a serious topic. I don't know how many weeks it'll go, a couple. I'm already going to be long in this series, but in this season. But we're going to talk about the many faces of sexuality. I think that's very important. And if it is possible, after that series, I want to bring in Dale and Val. Val, if you're listening, the time will be coming soon where Dale and Val have a 3-hour discussion on what was the discussion? On free will. Sorry, free will. And after that 3 hours, they will both complain that they haven't even gotten past the introduction. I'm cutting you off at 3 hours because they can really go a long time. If you think that I'm long-winded, just listen to a Dale and Val show. By the way, I should charge admission to that show because that's always a good show. So I want to squeeze that in. And then our final series will be on the devil. That's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm not going to say much more than that. But I think it's somewhat strange that we spend so much time talking about the God side of the story without talking about the demon side of the story. And so we're going to explore Satan in our final series of the show. It'll be worth the wait, I promise. So until next time, thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Yes, guys. Thank you.